First of all, very happy to be here and excited and slightly intimidated. It's a pretty hard group of people to follow, and knowing who's following me, it's I'm not stopping wars, I'm not electing governments as such, and I'm not fighting wars. I'm selling running shoes and insurance and trying to make a difference in advertising, but trying to do it in a way that moves my industry forward, and that be what I want to do and what I'm trying to do. So, very happy to be here, slightly intimidated, but also in the spirit of strategy, I feel like the first thing we should do is, moving things forward, it's always about a collaboration. So, Jeremy, I thought you were extraordinary. See, my theory is just between the four of us, we could do something extraordinary. We need all players here. See, my whole thing is, forget Peace Day. If we start War Day, everyone kicks the shit out of each other for one day of the year. The rest of the 364 days are then peace, by default, right? See, I feel like it's all about lateral thinking, and I think that's, keep the bar low, let everyone get their yips out for one day, and then we're done. Anyway, I'm an advertising guy, I'm a classic advertising guy, and I say that with a lot of pride, but I also know the ins and outs and the hurdles that we have to face as an advertising industry. And I'm a creative person through and through, but I feel like I've matured a lot. I'd like to think I've matured a lot from being a very selfish creative person who was seduced by the creativity of something and just trying to do something to prove how creative we were and thinking that creative would solve everything, to very much someone who really believes in the strategy of creativity and that everything that we do has to have purpose. So everything that we try and strive to do at Droga 5 is creativity with a purpose, and that comes from the strategy in everything we do. And while we're celebrated for our creativity, if you skin that, all our work, albeit for worthy things or for capitalist things, I think the thing I'm proudest of is the insights and the thinking in there. And there's no revelations, there's no epiphanies that we've had that are sort of formulas for success. If anything, I think we're strategically neutral or strategically agnostic. I mean, we don't have a formula for doing anything, and I think it's sort of a little bit foolhardy to do that. But I think it boils down to some basic principles and some values that I try and adhere to, and that's the well that I go to is, being Australian, we like to keep things pretty simple. That's an advantage we have. So I'm sort of obsessed by the everyday, and everything that we set out to do is sort of grounded in the everyday and finding the truth in any mission and finding the truth in any strategy as a motivation and as a place that we can actually go to that will get people to do it. Because unlike my very revered other speakers, I'm dealing in a lot of territories where there's a lot of subjectivity. Sometimes the biggest battles I face is the CEO's wife doesn't like dogs, or the budget's been cut, or things like that, or the sneaker's out of fashion. It's not about pending Russian on our doorstep or humanitarian crisis, which is a great motivator. Sometimes we have to find motivation and get people to engage in what we do when essentially they're not really interested in what we do. Who was it, Orwell, who said that advertising is the rattling of a stick in a swill bucket, which is pretty extreme, a bit harsh. But we've moved on a long way from that. But beyond being intimidated, I actually suddenly had an epiphany when I was coming to this speech, where I realized that actually I think I have the best of all worlds, because advertising is at the intersection of every industry, and advertising is at the intersection of every issue. And there is no issue or industry that we can't rub up against or contribute to with our strategic and creative thinking. And I love the fact that in a regular, not a regular day, but in any given day in our industry, I could have a meeting with the UN, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a hip-hop mogul, a trendy hipster startup company, and I can do it dressed as a slob. And my opinion and my thinking is still valued, but they understand that our industry has a huge and immense amount to contribute to what we do. So I thought it might be useful to actually just sort of dig, not too deep, but just a little bit into showing what we were trying to think with what we do at the agency and how we approach and how we tackle things. And as I said, our starting point with anything is not about how creative we are or how smart we are or how clever we are. is it really starts with, why the hell would anyone give a shit? Like really, that's our starting point in the conversations we have internally in our office from when we get briefed by the client, whatever the mandate, whatever the mission is. Why is it what we do? Why would anyone care? Like, it's moved from being an industry full of assumptions where if you spent money or you said this, you got attention, to the consumer doesn't have to pay attention to what we have to say. So we all know we have to earn their respect, earn their attention. So our starting point with any point of communications, any strategy is, why would anyone care? What's in it for them? What's our ask? And that's really how we tackle anything. And that, as I said, that applies from running shoes to UNICEF to politics to you name it. It's this kind of a lens that sounds very, 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 very simple and very, very lazy, but it's actually not. You know, I feel like that as an industry we've avoided the obvious, whereas I think inspiration comes from the obvious. Inspiration comes from the everyday, because that's what moves us. So if we can join the dots between A and B, between what our mission is and what our intentions are, and B, what the consumer needs, then that's how we do it. So I thought I'm not going to show you work as such, I'm just going to skim, but I'm just going to give you little intentions of what we set out to do. So we launched Droga 5 years ago, and I'd sort of been through the what's Siri got to say about this? Siri doesn't believe I went through the agency system. No, I sort of walked through the networks, and I just sort of started to believe, you know, there's got to be more we can do with what we have. You know, as I said, we're such a bright, energetic industry, albeit creative, albeit strategic, albeit anyway, where we can do so much more, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for the influence and the impact that we can have. And that's what we try to do, is what are the ramifications of our thinking, and what's the ramifications of our work, and how do we apply that? And at some levels that can seem superficial, and hopefully not too superficial, and other times we can create properties and entities that actually might be able to change the world. Maybe not Peace Day, but stuff that can actually make a huge difference to the world. Saying that, the first thing that actually set our agency in motion was not at Worthy, but it was a good lesson for us about understanding and being, again, seeking the truth in any strategy. That's where we start. And it's also about understanding who you're really talking to. Not what's of interest to us as an agency, not what's of interest to the client, but what's of interest to the person you're talking to. And a lot of people actually forget that. So our very first thing that we did when we launched the agency 5 years ago was for a fashion brand called Marc Ecko. I'm not going to show you the ad, but I'm just going to, if I can. Oh, okay, there we go. That would always help. I'll just show you 20 seconds of.
On NBC5, ABC 13 News.
Marc Ecko.
Graffiti artist pulled off an internet hoax that even got the attention of the White House.
Eyewitness News.
This comes to us now from WNBC.
Someone spraying graffiti on President Bush's jet.
On the president's plane.
What were these guys doing to Air Force One?
Organized by designer and entrepreneur Marc Ecko.
Graffiti. We also talked to the Pentagon about the video today.
And it looked so authentic, in fact, the Air Force actually checked to see whether the plane had been vandalized.
I like that.
Anyway, the thing about that was, apart from being told that we were breaking the Patriot Act with our first commercial, which as a naive, ignorant Australian, I said, what's that? Let's do it anyway. It was more about understanding the context of what our messaging were going to be consumed in. We knew that the audience didn't care about advertising, wouldn't digest advertising, and also the mood of the nation was very fragile and wanted to believe everything was real. And also the news media was very lazy, so we could use them as our medium. So we created something that we thought could actually exploit and would actually live up to the brand, which is Marc Ecko started as a graffiti artist. So we had to, sadly I know too much about graffiti now, but I had to read up on it. But what was true to him that could only be appropriate for him, and I feel like that's what agencies miss, is they try and have agency styles and as opposed to doing the very appropriate thing for themselves. And if you've ever tried to rent a 747 anonymously, don't do it, it's very, very tough. Changing gears completely, again, in one of the most competitive categories is obviously charities. And charities is one of the things where everybody's competing for eyeballs and money and attention, and it's one of the most cluttered, as you would know, Jeremy, one of the most cluttered arenas. And it just struck us, again, understanding how your message will be consumed is more important than just the executions. And again, we're an industry seduced by executions and not the strategies and the thinking. And our idea was, forget trying to raise money just through telling people about the water crisis around the world. Why can't we create an event? Why can't we create something that gets the consumer where they are actually open to messaging and more conducive to parting with money? If I stop someone in the street and want to talk to them about the humanitarian crisis in Africa and children, dying from water crisis, they're not interested. But if I get them in a restaurant where they're sitting in a restaurant drinking free tap water, suddenly there's a chance where I can have a conversation. So we created something called the TAP Project for UNICEF, which is now in its 5th year, and it's now the biggest initiative in UNICEF's history, and it's actually raises millions every year, just from a simple logo. And I think that's the thing, like understanding what we can do doesn't always have to manifest as ideas as such, but it's just going to be communication ideas and understanding context. So the starting point in that is so mind-numbingly dumb and easy. That's why I say about the obvious is we take water for granted. It gets put in front of us in every single restaurant, particularly in the US. That's the time to have the conversation, as opposed to just doing lots and lots and lots of ads. I think also one of the insights we apply is know who your target is. I think this is, politics. So we've rubbed up against politics. So we were asked by the Obama campaign in the last election if we could help them with Florida. And I think one of the things that we don't realize and we don't do enough of in our industry is really understand the target. And sometimes your best target isn't your target. Your target is someone else around your target who can influence them. Don't always, maybe there's a military thing as well, but don't always go after the person you're intending. You can always go around them to someone else that influences them. And the idea in this one was as simple as it is naive, but there's real truth in it again, is Florida was going to come down to, it was going to be one of the influential swing states. It was literally down to a couple of 100,000 votes, which is where the discrepancy has been during the Bush era. And we knew that the swing vote was the elderly Jewish vote. We just knew that. And they were cynical about Obama. So we thought, what's the one audience that this audience cares about? Is their grandchildren. So we developed a whole campaign just aimed at Jewish grandchildren. And I'll show you like 20 seconds of that.
If Barack Obama doesn't become the next president of the United States, I'm going to blame the Jews. I am. These are the people who vote in Florida, and the Florida vote can make or break an election. If you don't think that's true, why don't you think back to 2 elections ago when a little man named Al Gore got by Florida? You could compare an elderly Jewish woman like Nana to a young black man. I mean, think about it. Tracksuits. Let's start there. They both love tracksuits. They can't get enough of them. They like things and bling and money and jewelry and stuff. They both say yo all the time, or Jews go right to left. Oi. What else? They all their friends are dying.
No.
Anyway, you should look it up. But that's just the video. But it was it's the first time anyone's put humour in a political campaign. But more important than that, because obviously we knew who our target audience was. 35,000 young Jewish students signed up to schlep down to Florida to go and basically do one-on-one meetings with their grandparents. And he got the biggest Jewish vote in the last 40 years in Florida. And again, it's about targeting. Sometimes narrow focus is more important than just being, shotgunning anything. So while that's sort of comedy and that's sort of, again, everything starts with the insight. Who do you target? How do you target? Why would anyone care? What is the ask? And in everything we do, we always try and move from what's the message to what's our ask of people. And if you're going to have an ask of people, again, going back to why would they? Why would they care? Why would they care? I'm jumping quickly. I can't talk as fast as Jeremy, but I'm trying to make a point. Okay, so the million is another thing. We were approached by the Department of Education, and they said to us, how do we make academic achievement a worthwhile brand? Again, in the public schools of New York City, where 60% or nearly 55% of black students don't graduate. And the government had spent hundreds of millions of dollars actually just telling, which is what advertising people do, they go through the motions, paint by number, telling kids to stay in school because school is cool, and that's just a load of wasted time. It's just dead money. And again, it's knowing who you're talking to and what messages they'll respond to. And sometimes the best answers take us out of our comfort zone as agencies. The answer doesn't always have to be something that we can create. It can be something that we can facilitate, but again, it's knowing who your audience is. And we knew that the average black student in these worst developed public schools didn't care about advertising, weren't consuming advertising. The only thing that's the center of their universe is cell phones. So we created a program to give every one of these children a free cell phone where their minutes and their text time was completely based on their results at school, them turning up. It was all a motivation campaign. So it was good old-fashioned bribery, but you put the center of their universe into them. Oh, I'm getting flagged 5 minutes. Again, sometimes there was actually no advertising to that, but the thinking behind that is just the same that you would put in any ad. Like, what you do, the starting point is what's going to work, what's the right answer, not what's the advertising answer. And that I'm still, we're an advertising agency. We love advertising. We want to contribute something positive to society, and we want to actually not produce pollution advertising, but it doesn't always have to be advertising. Oh, I'll just do this because I love this. This is for you because you're English.
I'll be your dream, I'll be your wish, I'll be your fantasy. I'll be your hope, I'll be your love, be everything that you need. I love you more with every breath, truly, madly, deeply do. I will be strong, I will be faithful, cause I'm counting on a new beginning, a reason for living, a deeper meaning.
I'll go past it. Puma is a great client of ours, and they're the great client of ours because they suddenly realized they're better off being a best version of themselves than a compromised version of Nike. Most brands always aspire to be the brand that's number one. And as soon as a brand takes on its own body language and own behavior, and that's our job, is to give them strategies to actually live up to that, then they can actually be the best version of themselves. And Puma is a brand that suddenly wanted to get back to the joy of who they are. And sometimes the right answer is actually creating new categories. I think that's really important about what we do as an industry and we do as messaging and communication is we have to create messaging and communication that fits already in with consumers' existing behaviors. We can't expect them to come over to what we want to do. We have to create stuff that aligns with what they are already doing. And sometimes that is creating new categories. This is the only full ad I'll show you. So, we created something for Puma, which was based on the fact that most people who wear Pumas aren't going to play for the NBA or the NFL. It's lifestyle. And we wanted to create the first lifestyle sports brand and become the champions of any sport you can play with a beer in your hand, where the motto is give 75%.
Backspin on a warped table under bad light. A kiss off the 8 ball, a bank on the 6. Double bull in a single throw, 3 pints in. Picking up a spare on the final frame. Singing on key, off key, and losing keys. Steady hands, blurry eyes. Bars, billiards, basements, bacon sandwiches with extra hot sauce. Surviving buzzkills, third wheels, cock blocks, and cabs in the rain. Finish lines drawn by dawn. These are the providence of the after-hours athlete. When last call calls, don't answer. The night 2 is for sport, and they are the champions.
Again, finding truths in real places. Everyone in this room is an after-hours athlete. We've just never had anyone sponsor us and never been part of it. And our job is to look for business ideas as much as creative ideas. That may be a beautiful execution, but the idea in that is 50 times more important than that execution. That's actually a business model. And again, if you start with what is our intent, what are we trying to do? What is the strategy? What is the strategy? What is the strategy? I think that is why every conversation in our office starts with that. I never review work by just looking at scripts or layouts or anything first. It's always like, what is our intentions? How are we going to get there? We need to be nimble. Sometimes we have to change tact along the way. But if it's based in a human truth, then it's got some foundation you can go back to. If it's based in just something being funny or clever, then it's got nothing to go back to. If it's based in insight and truth, you've always got rock solid foundations. 2 more little things. Also, you can look at categories and think, how can you, it's always about, as I said before, being true to the person or the category you're in, like not emulating anybody else. This is hard to explain in 20 seconds. But.
We started by putting every page of Jay-Z's book out in the world, every day for a month, prior to the book's release. But the pages weren't just randomly placed. Every page's location was inspired by the story on each page, putting Jay-Z's entire biography in context. Fans could actually walk through Jay-Z's life right where it happened, finding pages in 13 major cities in the US and abroad, searching for everything from huge iconic billboards to unique collectible items. And if the media didn't exist near Jay-Z's life landmarks, we created it, taking the campaign to places money just can't buy. Gucci made custom jackets stitched with a page. A Cadillac wrapped with pages paid homage to the birthplace of New York hip-hop. A page about Big Pimpin' covered the bottom of the Delano pool. Even a bronze plaque was installed in the Marcy Projects, where Jay-Z spent his childhood. We let the story on each page determine each location. The unique pages covered hundreds of thousands of square miles.
I mean, you've got to reward your audience. Again, I'll say that. You give them something. If you're going to actually ask them to do anything, give them something to do. And that is about, again, debunking the regulars of an industry. You know, Jay-Z and hip-hop is all about swagger and confidence. And the book industry is all about keeping something back and making people want to go and buy the book. And we're the complete opposite. We're so arrogant and so confident. He's going to put his whole book everywhere that you're still going to buy his book. That's how good he is, and that's how he feels. And then making it with Bing, which was about making an immersive experience. The last thing I want to talk about is, again, being true and sometimes take the varnish off. I'm a big believer in taking the varnish off. Our industry is so full of shit, and we polish everything, and we make everything look so saccharine. No wonder people think that our industry is patronizing. And people, nothing resonates like honesty and reality and rawness, and it doesn't have to be boring. And you could take probably one of the most patronizing categories across the globe is insurance and retirement. And basically, if you believe in insurance or retirement, there's only two options. You're either going to die poor and miserable, or you're going to walk along the beach to a yacht that's moored there for you, and that's it. And I feel like that's not the reality of it. So we created something for one of the biggest financial institutions in the US called Prudential. And the idea was, let's celebrate the 10,000 people that retire every single day by giving them a platform and acknowledging their wisdom, their experiences, even their hopes and fears, but give them a platform and take them seriously. So this is a quick little blurb. Goes on and on, but the essence in that one is respect your audience, respect your audience. In essence, you know, what we're trying to do in our agency isn't any different from what anyone else is trying to do in your agencies, but we really put, as I said, purpose in and good intentions, and we're trying to contribute something positive to the industry, to the world at large. We have the tools, we have the minds, and our strategy now created. There isn't anything that we can't make better or contribute to with our industry, with the best of our industry. And as I said, be it politics, be it social good, everything, being it building capitalism, be it startups, there's nothing that can't be improved. But the first thing is just to be honest about it. Why do people care? Why should they care? What's it grounded in? You know, we want to change the world a little bit. You know, maybe we don't have the levers that the other people have, but we're trying to make our difference. And we have the beauty where no other industry has, was we can drift in and out of every other category. And that's why advertising is extraordinary. And that's why I'm more hopeful now about the good our industry can do than ever before. So, thank you.